Hi, I'm Juliana Sly with Government Business Results, and I'd like to welcome you to today's interview, where we ask the question, is the public sector ready for in-person events? And to help us navigate the answer is Carrie Ray, President of GovEvents. Caresoft has worked closely with GovEvents to bring this exclusive session to their partner community. So Carrie, tell me about the last year for you. How has it changed your business?
Wow, what a year for the event industry as a whole. Just this last year's been a little crazy, but things have definitely calmed down. If you look historically at government events, we had about 70% in-person events, and then 30% of the events were online. That totally switched to where we're at 94% totally virtual or online events. And we also saw a big increase of events this last year, having to pivot from in-person to online. Event marketers realized, hey, we can do a lot more instead of just having that one big event or 4 big events a year. And as you can see from this chart, the numbers have really increased significantly.
It's interesting. You see that green inflection point, which was 2020, and you see a little bit of that dip happening in the April-May timeframe. But then the number of events seems to take off towards December. And as we come into 2021, we see the purple at the very top, and it looks like things don't seem to be slowing down very much.
It has not slowed down. I have to say that the government marketing community did an amazing job of pivoting so quickly from things stopping mid-March to, you can see that, there is a little blip, but that's it. I mean, I'd say within 2 to 3 weeks, they knew what they needed to do and just did a great job of switching to online.
Now, it's interesting. I know that we typically take several months to plan and prep for an in-person event. And it seems like that timeline is much more consolidated on the virtual side.
Absolutely. If you're talking a big virtual event, it still may take that much time. But being that the majority have done webcasts or webinars, the timing for that is 2 to 3 weeks. And if you look at June 2020 to June 2021, you'll see a big increase. The majority of webcasts, that's a 38% increase from last year to this year.
And it's interesting. So what you're saying is not only are we having more events, but we're having a much shorter runway to the event itself.
That's right. Much shorter.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about why you decided to do this survey.
Well, I think the question of whether the public sector is ready for in-person events is really on everyone's mind. And what will those events look like in 2021 and beyond? Are they ready? When are they ready? How big of an event would they like to attend or comfortable attending? Safety expectations. Yeah. And marketers need to plan for the fall, the winter 2022. And this was just a great way to take our member base and really, survey them to find out how they were feeling about it. One of Caresoft's vendors, Smartsheet, actually had a really nice list of questions that they sent over and said, hey, we're interested in learning about these questions. And we sort of built out the survey from there.
And it's interesting. GovEvents is that one intersection where you have the majority of the government IT audience, as well as the technology vendors themselves, really centralizing to be able to discover, promote, events that are relevant for them. So it seems like you had access to the data and the audience from which you can ask the questions.
Yes, it was really great. We had 277 respondents in less than 3 days. They were very eager. Yeah, they were very eager to share how they were feeling about it.
So that's terrific, Carrie. Now, just at a high level, did any of the survey results surprise you?
Actually, some of them did. The first one that surprised me was the number of people that were actually comfortable attending an in-person event in 2021. I really thought it would be maybe a 50-50 split. And as you can see, it was nearly 75%, which I thought was huge and encouraging. The second one that surprised me was the size of the event that the government community would feel comfortable attending. We thought we were going to be in this, let's dip our toe in the water and start with really small events. But look, 55% say they're comfortable attending any size. But the most surprising, particularly following these two slides, is when we asked the question, if we provided an event online and in person, which were you more likely to attend? And 61% said online. So to me, it really showed that as much as we hear about this Zoom fatigue and people are tired of looking at the screens, that the government community actually learned to embrace it. They really like the convenience and the flexibility of it. So that to me, I think was the most surprising.
It really is interesting. So this idea of Zoom fatigue and this concern about having everything be virtual really needs to be balanced a little bit with the fact that there's a convenience factor here that is really important for folks. And I think it'll be interesting to see where this takes us. Now, from your standpoint, do you feel like folks are kind of leaning into the convenience factor of being able to attend an event from home or their office?
Yeah, absolutely. If you consider some of the downsides of in-person events, I have to get permission. I have to get in my car. I have to fight the traffic. I have to find a parking space. I have to get dressed in something other than my comfy clothes. I think all of that, to a lot of people, really outweighs the need for them to go to an in-person event.
So in many ways, it seems like the desire to have that flexibility to attend an event is really mirroring what we're seeing in terms of the desire to have the flexibility to telework in general.
Absolutely.
Interesting. And so I think, in many ways, we saw events online this year. Folks initially looked at online events as kind of the secondary aspect, right? There was initially this big emphasis inside of the public sector, and it has been for years, around having in-person events. And so the virtual events were sort of seen as a secondary or a plan B, if you will. But did that really change over the course of the last year or 18 months? Have we really seen virtual events come into their own?
I think we have. I really do. And they need to be done well at this point. The government community was very gracious, I think, for those first few weeks of people trying to figure it out and work out all the kinks. But it really has dominated. And I feel like hybrid events are really here to stay. And it's going to be a very important part of any event marketer's plan.
So as we begin to open up, what I'm hearing you say is we really need to plan for both, correct? We need to plan for in-person as well as hybrid.
Absolutely. Yes, totally agree.
And in some cases, do we need to, in some or in many cases, do we need to plan for both within the same event?
Yes, we do. Yes,
Okay.
We need to have the virtual component along with the in-person.
So that's a really important thing for marketers to understand, because I think we have been so focused for so long on the health aspects and the health concerns. But what we're also seeing is we see attendees raising their hand and recognizing the convenience factor now. And so whereas before it might have been health concerns that really drove a lot of the virtual attendance, it's more around convenience factor now, and marketers need to plan for both.
That's right.
So let's talk about the health aspects, though, for a moment. as well as a variety of other aspects. What should marketers be thinking about for their in-person events to make sure that attendees feel safe and confident?
Mm-hmm. Well, we asked them at a bare minimum, what are your expectations that are going to make you feel comfortable? And nothing too surprising here. Hand sanitizer stations, we want socially distanced seating, mandatory masks, temperature checks. Those were the top 4 answers. But a lot of other good feedback in terms of other items that I really think the event marketer needs to take a look at and say, hey, I think we maybe should consider incorporating this as well.
So masks are here to stay, it sounds like, at least for the foreseeable future as an option for folks.
I think so, yes.
So let's talk about, and masks in and of themselves become a personal preference at this point once the mandates are lifted, correct?
Correct.
Right. But so let's go beyond the personal preference into some areas where you have shows actually beginning to mandate some things on their own. So you know that the HIM show, which shut down just hours before its opening in March 2020, will hold its 2021 event in person. Now, the interesting thing is that they're actually requiring vaccination and proof of vaccination in order to attend. Do you know of any other major event that's requiring, proof of vaccination or your vaccine passport to attend? And do you really think that requirements like this will make events more or less attractive to attendees?
So I only know, Jules, of one other, and it's called Health. It's HLTH. Both happen to be healthcare events, and they both are requiring that you show your vaccination card before you're allowed in there. And that's for everybody. That's for the exhibitors, the attendees, staff. They all have to show their cards. I do think it will become more commonplace, and it's kind of a hot button right now. There's legality issues surrounding it, HIPAA, and it can be sort of a sticky question or a sticky situation, but I think we will see it more. And we asked our respondents, would you be comfortable attending with a mix of people? And I think that's pretty split down the middle here. 75% said, hey, we're ready to go back to in person. But when you start mixing people, that number drops considerably.
And I think it's also interesting when you have 75% saying I'm ready to go back in person, and then 56% say they're good with a mix. There's almost sort of peeling back the layers of the onion where once folks begin to really kind of think about what it means to go back in person, I think they start to have some questions around what that means for them personally.
Yes, absolutely. And I think something that we had touched on the other day, event marketers might want to start thinking about a mask similarly as they think about their lanyards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in terms of sponsorship opportunities, absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you have a sense from either the survey itself or from your interaction with your client base, what aspect of in-person events folks are most looking forward to getting back to?
Definitely networking and then the trade shows. In terms of networking, it's pretty much, it's really difficult to replicate that virtually when you're not there actually seeing someone. So I feel like that's been a big miss for most over the last year. And then really the trade show aspect of it. I have not heard any positive feedback on virtual booths. I don't feel like they worked last year. I'm not sure they're really going to ever be able to work out well. I definitely think there's a lot of room for improvement there. But also that just doesn't translate well, in my opinion, to virtual.
Absolutely. And of course, I would imagine being able to actually see things in person and participate in that live sense.
Right. Being there at someone's booth even to watch the demo or show how they can use it. There's just some things that in person, you have to do it that way.
Absolutely. So thinking about in-person events and thinking about everything that is now becoming a requirement for in-person events for health reasons and for comfort reasons, how does it all impact venue selection?
That's a good question. I would say, first of all, they're probably going to have to look for a slightly larger venue to accommodate some of these safety minimum requirements. There's a lot of great, particularly in DC, Maryland, Virginia, some really great boutique-y, kind of neat places to hold your event. So I feel like they're either going to need to really cut down on the amount of people that they're used to having at that venue, or go a little bit bigger so they can have the social distancing and really meet the needs of the audience.
And I would imagine that many of the venues understand this and are probably working through how to best position their offerings for the marketers as well.
Yes, they are. They are.
So we've already talked about quite a few changes. Do you have any predictions about how COVID is going to change the events in our industry permanently?
Permanently is a big word, Jules. I definitely think for the foreseeable future, we'll definitely see some changes. The first is just, online's here to stay, and hybrid is our new reality. And one of the big changes is when you go hybrid and you have a virtual component, it really requires a different skill set, marketing skill set and technology. So that's going to be, that'll be a big change. There's predictions out there that we're going to cap the number of people that can attend an event. So let's say you're used to having 500 and now you can have 100. I think the marketers are going to have to vet maybe a little bit more to try to find out who really is genuinely interested in attending this event. Despite the eagerness of the slide we looked at with, hey, we'll go to any size event, I do think that we will see the majority of smaller events, at least to start, probably well into 2022. And then I think there's really going to need to be a compelling reason to get people to go to in person. They'd like that convenience and flexibility. So they need to figure out a way, how can we draw people away from the computer screen and get them in person?
It's a really interesting juxtaposition or maybe even a flip of how we used to think of events in the past, right? So as you bring up, the in-person events are going to have to naturally be smaller, whereas in the past, we went for bigger is better in terms of in-person events. The more people we can invite, the bigger the event space, the more opportunities that we can sort of pack into an in-person event. That feels to have completely flipped to where the in-person events are actually going to be these smaller, more intimate, perhaps more selected gatherings, and the bigger events are actually going to be online. Does that feel in line with what you're seeing in terms of response from the survey?
It does feel in line. It does. And not to say we won't have those mega events. I think we will. It'll be interesting to see what happens this fall and winter in terms of that. But I think you're right on with that point.
And it's interesting because in a way, it seems like we really democratized a lot of these events through a virtual lens. But I want to go back and talk about that virtual lens for a moment, because it seems like when we're thinking about a hybrid event, we've got the physical component of the event with everything that you've talked about, the masks, the sanitizers, the spacings. But we also have to look at the virtual events separately as well. And you talked a little bit about the need to make sure that we're making those virtual events high quality. So to me, when you have a hybrid event, it feels a little bit like the virtual event component is almost an event within the event itself.
Yes, I would agree. And I would agree that it's got to be top notch. If you're going to do the hybrid, you need to make sure that it's up there.
Okay, so let's really kind of continue this drill down into the in-person events because that's why we're all here. You talked about the fact that in-person events are likely to be smaller and likely to be more regionally focused. Did the survey reveal anything about people's readiness preferences based on their location?
Jules, that's a good question. Bruce Frank from Granicus actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, Carrie, I read the blog article. I'm just curious, did you gather any demographic information? I want to know if perhaps maybe the left-leaning states were less hesitant to attend an in-person event and the right-leaning, maybe if they were more willing to attend." And I had that information, but we just hadn't done anything with that. So we created this map of all the respondents, and we had 39 states that actually participated in the survey, which I thought was great. And as you can see, I was thinking we probably would see a little bit of a difference. And as you can see, we don't. Those in the pink are, they're ready in 2021. So and what we did was we did the majority of the respondents from each state.
So that's great. So it really backs up your 75% statement, right? In a very uniform way where folks are ready and they're ready, in just about every state to start attending in-person events, so long as the convenience factor is there for them.
Convenience factor, yes, and that the safety precautions are taken into account as well.
Outstanding. So if I'm a marketer and I'm hearing this, I'm thinking that's great. I can start to really layer in-person events and start to think about my calendar in a more robust way. I have the flexibility to start to add in-person back in. But I've got questions around seasonality. If it's one thing that COVID has taught us is the normal isn't the normal until it's the new normal, right? And I have to ask, between the number of events increasing and the spacing between the events and the timing between the events decreasing, what has happened to the traditional seasonality? We used to, on the federal side, August and September typically were good months. Has that changed at all? And what are your thoughts on if you were to advise the marketing team that we're talking with today on how to think about layering in their physical events against a calendar? What would you advise them?
I think this year is going to be fairly reflective of the past. Not many people traveled last year, so there's a lot of pent up vacation. Hey, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. So I think it's going to be really slow this summer, particularly for in-person events. So I feel like it'll really be very reflective of years past. Spring and fall, very busy. And then next year could be a whole new ballgame.
So you're advising marketers that they really need to have an eye on the calendar when they're thinking about their events, because this summer is likely to be a little slower than last summer. So they might not get some of the attendance levels that they were hoping for, correct?
That's what I'm thinking. I feel like the general feeling out there is that people can go on vacation now. They can go see their families that maybe they haven't seen in 18 months. So I would agree with that.
Excellent. So let's talk about the fall, and let's talk about specifically with regards to traveling. Did your survey shed any light on whether or not folks are willing to get on a plane and fly somewhere?
Yes. So 55% said, hey, we're ready to go. We're ready to fly. We're ready to stay at a hotel. A little less than those that said, hey, we're ready to attend in person. But if you look at those that want to drive, that's pretty close to that, 75% that said we're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, did you see any history of this over the course of the last 6 months in terms of folks attending in-person events?
We did. We took a little deep dive into what has been happening from January to June in terms of in person. So here's a good snapshot of that. Interestingly enough, GlobalSoft held their event in March in Tampa. They had 297 registrants, and then 273 people actually attended in person. So that was in March. So that's a little surprising. We also touched base with David Powell at FBC and just said, hey, how have your events been going so far this year? And he said, we're following all the state guidelines. We're starting to have a few hybrid events, but he's really been happy and feels like his in-person aspect has been successful. NCMA, they did their subcon training. That was a hybrid event. They had 29 people show up in person, and they were really happy with that and said it went really well.
That's really interesting, particularly when you take into account the fact that the vaccines weren't widely available in March. And in each of the instances that you described, it seems like there was a very compelling event with a targeted audience and a solid reason for the attendee to actually attend in person.
That's right, Juliana.
Excellent. So we've covered an incredible amount of ground this afternoon, and I really thank you for your time and your input. The survey has certainly shown a light, I think, on important factors for marketers to consider as they're planning their events calendar over the course of 2021 and into 2022. And it covers everything from in-person to hybrid to comfort levels to convenience levels. As you step back and reflect on all of this, Carrie, are there several takeaways that you think are most important for our marketers to lead with today?
Yes, I do have a few key takeaways. First, hybrid is the new norm, and we're going to need to incorporate the virtual component into our events, and it's going to need to be done very well. Safety, we touched on this. We talked about the top 4, but I would encourage marketers to look at that whole list and see what else they can incorporate into their events to really help people feel comfortable about going back in person. Webinars and online events are here to stay. The charts that we looked at and people want that convenience. They want to have that option, and we need to accommodate for that. And then just having that compelling reason, that compelling content to get people to go back to in-person events and pull them away from their computer screens. For me, those are the top takeaways.
Outstanding. And if somebody wanted to have more information about the survey or really kind of dig a little bit deeper into what events are available, where would you send them?
If you go to govevents.com and /blog, I think we might even have some links in here that they can click on and go directly and find out a little bit more information about this survey. Please. And you can also email me if you have any questions. I'd love to hear from everybody.
Excellent. So we see GovEvents, and we're also beginning to see Gov white papers. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Gov white papers is?
Sure. So we launched Gov white papers about 6 months ago. And it's very similar to what we did with GovEvents. Just instead of events, we're now focused on content. And it's really the place to go to find all government-related white papers, ebooks, case studies, infographics. And we just really want to make finding that educational and thought leadership content less tedious and easy for government and industry to find. Right now, we have over 1,300 pieces of content on the site, and we invite everybody listening to please go on there and post your government-related content. It's completely free to do that.
That's excellent. So not only is it a value for the government customer who's researching and evaluating technology solutions, but from a marketer standpoint, you have an opportunity to really take a look at some of the new and innovative content that's out in the industry and get a sense of what's working.
Yes.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Carrie. I really appreciate it. This has been a great discussion with a lot of valuable insights for our marketers. And I also wanted to give thanks to Carasoft as well for bringing this informative session to the partner community.
Thanks, Jules. It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.